So, here's the thing. Growing up, my dad made it pretty clear who his favorite was. My brother Jason was always the golden child. You know the type. Charismatic, the natural leader. Always in the spotlight. Always getting praised for everything he did. Meanwhile, I was the quieter one, content to stay in the background, do my own thing, and avoid the drama. I'd be lying if I said I didn't envy the way people gravitated towards Jason. It's not that I hated him or anything, but it did sting. We had the same opportunities, but it always felt like he was the one who mattered more. And I wasn't blind to it. My dad always made a point of telling me that Jason had what it took to carry on the family business, to be the next in line. I was just, well, I guess I wasn't quite cut out for it. That's how it felt anyway. But I didn't really start feeling the full weight of the situation until the day my dad made an announcement at dinner. He said he was handing over the family estate to Jason. You know, the house where we all grew up. The place that had always been more than just bricks and mortar to me. And just like that, the decision was made. Jason would be the one to take it all. No discussion. No real consideration for me. I sat there, feeling the anger rise up inside me. It wasn't just about the estate. It wasn't about the land or the money. Though, yeah, that stung a bit too. It was about the constant feeling of being overshadowed. It was about never being good enough, no matter how much I tried. My dad's words hit harder than I could have imagined. He didn't even see me as someone who could inherit the estate. To him, I was just, I don't even know, second best. But that night, I decided something. I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. If my dad wanted to kick me out of the family estate, then fine. But I wasn't going to let him have the last word. I was going to buy the whole damn place and take control. I wasn't going to be anyone's second choice anymore. I'll be honest. At first, the idea seemed crazy. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had worked hard for everything I had, and I wasn't about to let Jason or my dad walk all over me. I wasn't just going to be the quiet one in the background anymore. This time, I was going to be the one in charge. Growing up, the family estate was everything. It wasn't just a house. It was the cornerstone of our family legacy. My dad built it with his own hands, and everything about it screamed power and tradition. From the grand oak trees in the front yard to the marble floors inside, the estate was a symbol of who we were and what we had accomplished. But for me, it always felt like I was fighting for my place there. It wasn't that my dad didn't love me. I know he did, in his own way. But from the very beginning, it always felt like Jason was the one who got all the attention. Jason was the kind of guy who walked into a room and automatically commanded respect. He had that charm, that energy that made people gravitate towards him. Everyone thought he was destined for greatness. And I guess, at the time, I did too. He was the perfect heir, the perfect son. As for me, I was the quiet one, the one who preferred staying in the background, avoiding the limelight. I never felt like I fit into the mold my dad had for his legacy. Sure, I had my own strengths. I worked hard, and I had a quiet determination, but it never seemed to matter. I was always in Jason's shadow, and no matter what I did, it felt like I was always playing catch-up. It wasn't just the small things that got to me, it was the bigger picture. I remember when Jason and I both graduated college. He got a job in the family business right away. My dad had made it clear that Jason would eventually take over the company, and everyone just assumed it was a given. Meanwhile, I was expected to carve my own path. You're your own man, my dad would say. You don't need the family business to make your mark. And while I understood the sentiment, it still stung. It felt like I wasn't worthy of the same opportunities that Jason was getting, even though I had put in just as much work. When it came time to talk about the estate, I figured my dad would want to involve me in the decision-making process. After all, this place was just as much mine as it was Jason's, right? Wrong. My dad sat me down one evening and told me that he decided to hand the estate over to Jason, saying that he was the one who understood the business and had the vision to carry it forward. My heart dropped in that moment. I don't think I had ever felt more invisible in my entire life. It was as if everything I had worked for, Everything I had been a part of didn't matter. Jason was the chosen one, and I was just an afterthought. It wasn't just about the estate, though. It was the constant comparisons that always felt like a slap in the face. "Why can't you be more like Jason?" my dad would ask, as if it was a simple question. "You should take a page from Jason's book," he'd say, giving me advice that always seemed to put me at a disadvantage. It wasn't that Jason was a bad person. He wasn't. But it was hard to shake the feeling that my entire life had been spent as his shadow. That night at dinner, when my dad told me that he was giving the estate to Jason, was the breaking point. It wasn't just the estate. It was the culmination of years of feeling overlooked, of feeling like I wasn't good enough. I had tried so hard to make my dad proud, to carve out my own place in this family. But it felt like nothing I did ever measured up to Jason. I tried to brush it off at first. "It's just a house," I told myself. "It's not that important." But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the house. It was about the principle of it. I had been left behind once again, with no say in something that was supposed to be mine too. Jason had everything handed to him, while I had to fight for every little piece. And now, the last thing I had left, the family estate, was slipping through my fingers. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let this go. If my dad was going to give the estate to Jason, I was going to take it for myself. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had spent enough of my life being second to him. I was done being the quiet one in the background. I was going to buy the estate, and when I did, I was going to take control of my own future, on my terms. It wouldn't be an easy battle, but it was one I was willing to fight. I had the resources, the knowledge, and the drive to make it happen. I wasn't going to let my dad, or anyone else, decide what my future looked like anymore. The estate, the legacy, it was mine to take back, and I was going to make sure it stayed that way. The next few days were a blur of intense focus. I couldn't let this go. I knew that if I wanted to buy the estate from my dad and take control, I had to be strategic. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about showing my father and Jason that I had what it took to take charge of my own future. I started with research. The estate wasn't just a house. It was a full-fledged business. My dad had used the land for everything from farming to small ventures, and I knew the value of the estate was tied to how it was run. The more I looked into it, the more I realized that Jason wasn't the only one with influence over the family business. My father, though growing older, still held the final say in everything. I decided to get a lawyer involved. I didn't trust Jason to do the right thing when it came to this. After all, he was as much a part of the problem as my dad. I needed to make sure that if I was going to buy the estate, it would be under the right terms. I met with a lawyer who had helped with some of the business deals in the past, and I explained my plan. She was hesitant at first, not because she doubted my ability, but because she saw the emotional weight of the situation. "You realize this won't be easy," she warned. "You're going to face a lot of pushback, especially from your father. But if this is what you want, I'll help." Her words only fueled my determination. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. I wanted to secure the estate, not just for its value, but because it was the one thing my father had taken from me. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about taking control, about showing everyone that I could do this on my own. I knew Jason would be the biggest obstacle. He was always the one who could charm his way out of anything. It didn't matter if he didn't deserve the estate. He had a way of making people believe he was the right choice. But I wasn't about to let him dictate the terms anymore. I wasn't going to let him take the estate without a fight. I started to track Jason's moves. I knew his schedule. He was always at the office, talking about the family business, acting as though he was the one in charge. I spent hours analyzing the financial records, trying to figure out exactly how much the estate was worth. The numbers weren't easy to piece together, but I had the drive to see it through. I wasn't going to back down. Then came the unexpected part. I overheard a conversation between my dad and Jason that confirmed my suspicions. My dad, it seemed, wasn't as certain about the transfer of the estate as Jason had made it seem. They were discussing a potential buyer for part of the land, and the deal was still up in the air. That was my opening. I had already made the decision that I was going to buy the estate, but hearing this conversation gave me the confirmation I needed. I wasn't going to let my dad, or Jason, make the decision for me. I was going to take control of the entire estate, but I knew I had to do it carefully. The last thing I wanted was for them to suspect anything before I had everything in place. So, I took the next step. I arranged a meeting with the real estate agent who had been handling the family estate for years. I told him I was interested in buying the entire estate, and though he was surprised, he didn't hesitate. "It's a big move," he said, "but if you're serious, we can make it happen." He walked me through the steps, how to make the offer, how to present it, and how to ensure that everything went smoothly. I knew that this would be a delicate process. I couldn't just throw money at it and expect everything to work out. I had to be careful. Jason would never let me take this away from him without a fight. And my dad? He would probably never accept it. But I knew that if I did this right, there would be no turning back. I continued to gather the resources I needed. I made sure my finances were in order, and I started securing the support of key business partners who would back me up. I knew that if I could buy the estate, I'd be able to use it as leverage to finally take control of the family business. Jason would have no choice but to back down. But I wasn't just playing for the estate. I was playing for something bigger. I wanted to prove that I had the power to take control of my own destiny. Jason had spent his life getting everything handed to him. And now, I was going to show him that I wasn't just some kid in the background. I was the one who would rise to the top. The tension between me and Jason grew. Every time I saw him, it was like a reminder of everything I had been pushed aside for. The family dinners, the business meetings, the casual conversations. Everything felt like a battleground. I could see how confident he was, but I also saw the cracks in his armor. He was too sure of himself. He thought he had already won. But I knew better. I was going to get what was mine, and when I did, Jason wouldn't know what hit him. It was no longer just about the estate. It was about taking back my place in the family, taking back the power that had always been denied to me. And that was just the beginning. The real game was about to start. The day of the big meeting came. I had everything in place. My finances were set. My lawyer had drawn up the papers, and I was ready to make my move. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, but I knew this was it. This was the moment when I would take control, the moment when everything would change. The estate, the family business, it was all about to be mine. I had spent years being pushed aside, being treated like I didn't matter. But today, I would take what was rightfully mine. I walked into the meeting room, my heart pounding in my chest, but my face calm and determined. I knew Jason would be there. I knew my father would be there. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. As expected, my father and Jason were both there. The tension in the room was thick. Jason had no idea what was coming, and my father, well, he wasn't sure what to expect. But I could see it in their eyes. They thought they had already won. Jason sat there confidently, his usual smug grin plastered on his face, while my dad seemed more focused on Jason than anything else. I could almost hear them thinking, this is just another one of his little schemes. It won't work. But I was ready to prove them wrong. I started the meeting by casually mentioning my interest in the estate, how I had been thinking about buying the land for a while. Jason scoffed at the idea. "You? Buy the estate?" he said with a laugh. "What are you gonna do? Break the bank to make a foolish move?" I stayed calm, letting his words roll off my back. I had planned for this. I wasn't about to let him bait me into a confrontation. "Actually," I said, "I've already made the arrangements." The look on Jason's face was priceless. It went from confidence to shock in an instant. "What do you mean?" he demanded. "This estate isn't just something you can walk into and take. It belongs to me, and it always has." My dad was sitting quietly, watching the exchange between us, but I could see the tension building in his eyes. He wasn't happy about what was happening, but there was nothing he could do now. "I've already spoken with the real estate agent," I said, "and I've made the offer to buy the estate. It's done. All that's left is the paperwork. I looked directly at Jason as I said this, my voice steady, but my eyes filled with determination. The estate is no longer yours to claim. It's mine. Jason's jaw dropped. He looked at my father, hoping for support, but all my dad did was sigh and look down at his hands. He knew what was coming. There was no turning back now. "This is a joke, right?" Jason sputtered. "You can't just buy the estate. You don't even have the means to." "I have more than enough means," I interrupted. "And what's more, I've already secured the funds. I'm not here to beg for something that belongs to me. I'm here to claim what's rightfully mine." Jason stood up, knocking over his chair. His face was red with anger, but I could see the panic creeping into his eyes. "You can't do this," he shouted. "This is my birthright." "But it wasn't just yours," I replied, keeping my voice calm but firm. "It was always meant to be shared, and I'm done letting you take everything for yourself." The room was silent for a moment as Jason fumed, but it was clear. He had lost. I had outplayed him at every turn. His smug arrogance had cost him everything, and now he had nothing left to cling to. He couldn't charm his way out of this one. The power had shifted, and he was no longer in control. "Dad," Jason said, his voice shaky, "don't let him do this. You know what this means. You can't just let him take everything." But my father didn't speak. His silence said it all. He knew he had made a mistake by handing everything over to Jason without considering me. He knew this wasn't just about the estate. It was about the years of neglect, the years of favoritism that had led to this moment. I could see the regret in his eyes. He had finally realized the depth of the mistake he had made. But it was too late for him to fix it. The estate was mine now. Jason's face twisted in disbelief as he realized that the estate, and everything that came with it, was gone from his grasp. "This isn't over," he spat. "You can't just take it all. I'll find a way to fix this." But there was nothing he could do. The deal had been made, and I had already taken control. As the reality of the situation set in, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. This wasn't just about the estate anymore. It was about reclaiming my power, about finally standing up for myself after years of being pushed aside. As Jason left the room in a storm of anger and frustration, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. This was mine now. The family estate, the legacy, everything my father had built. It was all in my hands. The aftermath was everything I had hoped for, and yet it wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. Sure, I had taken control of the estate, and sure, I had proven to everyone, including my dad and Jason, that I was capable of standing up for myself. But something felt different now. The estate was mine, yes, but it wasn't just about the physical property. It was about everything that had built up to this moment. The years of being ignored, the years of being second place, and the years of letting my family believe that Jason was the only one worthy of the family legacy. As the legal papers went through, I made it clear that I was going to run the estate my way. I wasn't interested in just sitting back and collecting the money. No, I had bigger plans. I intended to restore the estate to its former glory, but on my terms. My father had made his choices, and Jason had always been the golden boy. Now I was going to make sure the estate was built into something even greater, something that would leave a legacy of my own. The first few weeks were a blur. I spent hours in meetings with contractors, lawyers, and financial advisors to make sure everything was running smoothly. I had a vision for what I wanted to do with the estate. I knew the land had potential, and I wasn't going to waste it. But no matter how much I worked, no matter how much I invested in the property, I couldn't escape the tension between Jason, my father, and me. Jason, of course, wasn't happy about the way things had turned out. He didn't take the loss of the estate lightly, and his attempts to undermine my authority started almost immediately. At family gatherings, he would bring up the subject of the estate, usually in a casual, offhand way, but I could see the resentment bubbling beneath the surface. He would make subtle comments about how I wasn't fit to run things, how I was too inexperienced to handle the weight of the legacy, but I wasn't going to let him get under my skin. I had learned to keep my composure, and this time, I wasn't backing down. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was from my father. He had called to apologize. "I should have been more supportive of you," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I know I made mistakes and I've been blind to how I treated you. You've always been just as capable as Jason, but I failed to see that." For the first time in a long time, I actually felt like he was listening. He acknowledged everything that had happened, everything that had led to this point. He didn't ask for anything in return, just wanted to make amends. It wasn't enough to make up for the years of favoritism, but it was a start. I could have let my anger fester, but I didn't. I knew that holding on to resentment wouldn't help me move forward. I had the estate. I had control. I had won. And with that, I knew it was time to move on and rebuild. Jason, on the other hand, didn't take my victory lightly. He made several attempts to regain control of the estate, either through backdoor deals or trying to discredit my decisions in front of others. But no matter how many times he tried, nothing worked. The estate was mine, and I had the power to shape its future. In time, the tension with Jason began to fade. Slowly, but surely, people started to respect my decisions. The estate started to thrive again, and I began to feel like I truly belonged in the family business, like I'd finally carved out my place. Jason, while still trying to maintain his position, could no longer shake the feeling that his time had passed. The estate was no longer a battleground for him to dominate. It was mine, and I had the final say. One day, a few months later, Jason came to me with a proposition. He asked if I would be willing to sell him back a portion of the land, just a small part, so he could feel like he had some ownership again. I knew it wasn't about the land. It was about his pride. But I saw a change in him. For the first time, he wasn't demanding or entitled. He was asking. I told him I would think about it, but deep down, I knew that I had won. Jason had finally come to terms with the fact that I wasn't the quiet little brother anymore. I had taken control of the estate and of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The family, over time, began to realize that things had changed. I wasn't the second choice anymore. I was the one in charge. I had taken everything that had been denied to me, and I had turned it into something bigger than anyone had expected. The estate was thriving, and so was I. I had built my own legacy, one that was all mine. In the end, it wasn't just about the estate. It was about reclaiming my sense of self-worth, proving to myself that I could do this, and showing my father and Jason that I wasn't just another backup option. I had become the man I was always meant to be. Jason eventually accepted my decision to keep the estate in my hands. And while we never fully repaired our relationship, there was a sense of understanding between us. I had achieved something that no one thought was possible, and I was at peace with the path I had taken. As for my father, he supported me more and more as time went on. He knew that he had made mistakes, but he also knew that I had earned my place. The family business was finally in capable hands, and I wasn't going anywhere.